It's with great pleasure that I'm up here. I've been invited to be the host, and it's been a little time in the making, but I think this being the first reading for the Writers in Exile, it's a very exciting time, and we hope with success we'll continue, and we're hoping to have 3 or as many as 4 readings like this a year, which would be terrific. Thank you to Bebe and the Harut Jazz Club for this venue. It's a great venue, and the food is excellent, as you'll see. Today we have exiled writers representing Eritrea, Ethiopia, Turkey, Colombia, Iran, and Syria. Freweini Berhane, as Gazoo was saying, was a wonderful chairperson of the Writers in Exile group and a good friend to us all. As most of you know, Aaron passed away on May 1st of last year from COVID. Aaron had founded the first independent newspaper in Eritrea after the government cracked down and arrest orders against him and many colleagues in 2001. Aaron made a daring escape amid a hail of bullets across the border into Sudan. Making his way to Canada, Aaron learned English, established a profitable Eritrean newspaper, fought for freedom of the press and human rights for those left behind in Eritrea. Aaron earned several degrees and became a professor at George Brown. After many years of delay, Aaron was finally able to bring his family to Canada. Aaron was in the final draft of an autobiography when he passed away at the age of 52. It will be published this year by Dundurn Press. So I'm delighted to introduce Aaron's daughter, Freweini, to read from her father's book. Is Freweini here? Ms. Berhane graduated from U of T with a double major in human biology and health studies, worked as a clinical research coordinator, and is continuing her education in the field of medicine and public health. So the Berhane tradition of high achievement and public service continues.
Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. So I picked a specific passage from my father's memoir, and the reason I picked this specific is because I feel this was a turning point of his life and our life. If it wasn't for this moment that he had decided to become a journalist and be a voice for the voiceless, I wouldn't be here standing today on behalf of him, and our life would have been different. So this passage always makes me wonder, what if he hadn't decided to become a journalist? So bear with me, I'm just gonna read a short story from his memoir. Starting a newspaper. One afternoon in the summer of 1994, I sat under the shade of a grapevine reading a newspaper in the compound of my parents' house. I was in my early 20s, and I lived there with my wife, Melat, and 4-year-old daughter, Freta. I turned page after page in a newspaper, but found only the same things that were broadcast on the radio and television. The press uniformly proclaimed that the government was doing a wonderful job in every sector, which was exactly the opposite of what I heard on the streets. One of the most controversial issues was the way the government handled the protest of ex-fighters. Without trying to understand the dire situation of the veterans, the government issued a statement in April 1993 to inform the soldiers that they would have to serve 2 additional years without a pay. This incited anger among the soldiers. Thousands of them organized themselves and took Isayasu Afwerki, the head of the country, from his office to a stadium where thousands of soldiers flocked to confront him personally. A few days later, the government arrested hundreds of soldiers for organizing the demonstration. Some of them were sentenced for years, and some of them even died from torture. I expected to hear a balanced story from the media about the strike, how civilized and fair the soldiers' demands had been. But on the contrary, the government-owned media attacked the demonstrators. I thought of my brothers, Caseta, Yosef, and Muse, who had died in their teens and early 20s fighting to build a free and democratic Eritrea, and resolved to write letters to the government-owned media, Hadas Ertra, about the issues that matter to me and majority of the people. They've never published a single one of my letters. I have to own the media to write whatever I believe is right, I said to Melat, my wife, as I sipped a cup of coffee and stared at the blue, cloudless sky. That would be very nice, Melat said, but who will let you do that? And she was right. 3 years had passed since Eritrea attained its independence, but the government did not intend to introduce laws that could allow citizens to exercise their basic rights, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, or even freedom of peaceful demonstration. So we had no choice but to wait. But on June 10, 1996, 3 years later, the day I had been waiting for arrived, and the government issued a press law that allowed private ownership of print media. I did not intend to let the opportunity pass and started to think about how I might carve out my place. I remember reading every section to absorb the terms and conditions of the proclamation, but the crucial aspects were very, very ambiguous, leaving plenty of room for interpretation. The next day, I went to meet my two old friends, Gabrai and Hatom. Knowing that they have interest in such a noble undertaking, I invited them to meet me at a cafe. As a waiter took my order, my friend Gabrai arrived. I knew Hatom would be late, not because he had 2 young children at home, but out of habit. While waiting for him, Gabrai and I dissected the agenda for our meeting. Half an hour later, Hatom appeared. "My apologies," he said, as he grabbed a chair from the table beside us. "Today you're forgiven," I said, "but next time, be punctual. This is serious business." "Okay, tell us what you have," he said, taking off his hat and wiping his bald head with his hand. I briefed him on the potential opportunities and the potential risks. They were intrigued and excited in spite of the ambiguities and the attendant dangers. "How much money will we need?" Gabrai asked. "Do you think it can be profitable?" Hatom added. "We will have to make a profit to stay in business," he laughed. "Right now, I know about the proclamation, but not very much about the business. That part we will need to research," I said. And I drew several sheets of paper from my bag, and I've assigned a task for each of us. The next time we met, it was at Gennet Lateria near the University of Asmara. We found out from our research that there was only one printing house and one distributor in the entire country with the capacity to print a newspaper. And it was owned by the government, and the costs were very expensive. We were extremely worried about being reliant on a government-owned print media or the government-owned printing house. "This is ridiculous," Hatom said. "The future of our business is very bleak. I don't think we will make a penny by publishing this newspaper. Come on, Haptom, my friend Gabrai said. We said from the start that we want to get into this business, not for the money, but to become the voice of the people. Listen, guys, I said. The reason we conducted this research was to discover what obstacles we would have to face. So now we know what they are. But there's no way for us to know whether we will succeed or fail if we quit now. Are you crazy? Haptom exclaimed. How are we supposed to work for free and burn what little savings we have? I don't see any other choice, I said. As our high school teacher, Mesfin, used to say, we are the future. So we have to have the courage to take the wheel. In the end, Haptom came around and we dispersed with the imperative to raise funds to meet our challenges. Since I had no money to start a newspaper business, I planned to ask my father to help me get started. So on a Sunday afternoon, I found him and my sister Sanait in the living room. She was knitting and he was sitting down with his Bible. I indicated for Sanait to give us some privacy, and she picked up her knitting and left the room. My father looked at me over his reading glasses. Do you have a minute? I asked and I sat down. He removed his reading glasses and looked at me silently but with a smile. I would like to start a newspaper business and I need your help, I said directly. Well, are you a good writer? He asked. I will be. So you're not. That doesn't matter. I have ideas and ambition, and I will make it work, I said. I was caught off guard since he posed a question I hadn't anticipated and started to lose my composure. Okay, I'm listening, he said, and placed the Bible on the sofa beside him. I launched into my presentation and described to him with excitement and passion the results of our research and the amount of money I needed to fulfill my dream of establishing the newspaper. I went on in an effort to impress him and to convince him to support my vision. He allowed me to finish and then folded his hands on his lap. This is a great idea, but the time is not right, he said. Why not? He looked at me before he went further. He didn't want to hurt my feelings, but he wanted me to hear what he had to say. First, he said with a very gentle tone, this is not a profitable business. You have already found that out in your research. Second, it is a risky business. This government is not ready to be challenged. You are young and there are great things you can do. There are great things that you don't know. You always say what's in your mind. That's fine in front of 2 or 3 people, but you will reach thousands with this weapon in your hand. That's very dangerous. He continued and identified many obstacles my partners and I had not contemplated or encountered in our research. But though my father did not want to encourage me, he also did not want to disappoint me. So in the end, he promised to give me a 1-room office and a small amount of money, 30,000 natfa. I thanked him and left the room feeling disappointed nevertheless. I had hoped or even expected that he would provide more than he did. Since neither my friend Gabrai or Haptom had any better luck raising money, we started small by opening our first office in Asmara. We furnished it with 2 tables and 4 chairs from my parents' house. Instead of buying a computer, we hired a printing house to type and lay out the newspaper. Instead of printing weekly as we had first envisioned, we decided to print bi-weekly. We named our paper Setit, after the only river in Eritrea, since we wanted our newspaper to flow unimpeded like a river. Just 6 months after the meeting with my father, the first issue of our newspaper was printed. Gabrai and I drove around the printing house. I drew close and saw a copy of SETI atop a bundle of 200 papers. I beamed and I plucked the top copy. I smelled the heady aroma of fresh newsprint, and I was thrilled at the notion that I was finally holding my newspaper in my hands. I turned the 8 pages of the issue and saw that it was just perfect, just as I had dreamed. This was the starting point of the first independent newspaper in Eritrea. That is history and will never be recited. Thank you for listening.
Is this working? Is this the one for people? Thank you, Freweini. Beautiful optimism in the face of oppression. Are there any questions from the listeners? Would anyone like to ask about any of the experiences that Freweini has had, or the family? How old were you when this happened? When when he established the SEFTA?
Newspaper?
Yes.
Is the mic or?
Yeah, can we get a second mic? Okay, test. Okay.
I was 4 years old around that time, yeah.
Yeah. Do
Yes.
you remember this at all? Or?
I remember the one room that my grandfather gave him, because it was in the big compound. We were all living together, and I used to remember going to the room, just seeing them working. They're always busy, and I was just this hyper kid, always, trying to cling with my father, and then ask him, can you hold me? Can you do this? And then he's like, yeah, just give me one moment, and like I'll play with you later on. And I remember seeing a bunch of newspapers. That I would never forget, yeah. And it's like, what do you do with this whole newspaper? And then it's like, we're gonna distribute it. And little did I understand, but I still did ask those questions, yeah.
I remember the moments when the newspaper was very successful, didn't it? Sell like 5,000 copies within a day or two?
Exactly, yes. At that time, no, but as I said, now when I think about it, there were always a pile of newspapers in the room, and then they would be gone within a day, and then they would bring another set. So when now I can comprehend that, it was selling very fast. At that time, not very much.
Are there any other questions from the group? Yes.
Is the newspaper still active?
No. In 2001, the government decided to shut down every private newspaper. And ever since then, now there's only one, and it's the government-owned newspaper. Yeah.
Yes.
Keith, not a question, but a comment really. Freweini, how lovely to see you. I've never met you, but I know who you are. I'm one of the few people in the room who's read the whole book, because I had to write a preface. And of course, Dawit Isaac is a co-founder with Aaron of that newspaper, the empty chair today. And I think that it's a measure of a man that it comes through very strongly in the memoir that he never forgot those who were left behind. And as Rui Mizawa will tell you, he worked tirelessly for all his friends and colleagues that had been left behind. He was always willing to come out, sign a petition, make a speech, get them in the news. So it seems sort of poetically perfect to have you standing there with a photo of Dawit Isaak.
Sorry, Brendan, I wanted to, I had a question for you, because
Go on.
you've read the book. I'm trying to remember what it was. But the great irony is, too, and you would know as much about this as I, but Aaron approached the Canadian government and said, what are you doing normal business with this oppressive regime? And these men that I knew, my colleagues, are still in prison. Many are dead. And the Canadian government, did you know of their response to that?
Well, this is a long story, so I'll keep it as brief as possible. Canada is one of the leading foreign direct investors in Eritrea, and we tried for years to point this out. There are several mining companies that do a lot of business there. Of course, Dawit Isaak is the linchpin of all the advocacy because he's a Swedish citizen. He went to Sweden, became a citizen. So the European Union was putting pressure on Eritrea, and for the better part of 20 years, little or nothing was done. They were able to get a phone call to Dawit in prison, but in between May the 1st last year, Aaron's passing, and now there has been action from within Canada. The Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights has invoked the Magnitsky sanctions against the top officials in Eritrea. These were named after a Russian lawyer who was killed, used to be Bill Browder's lawyer, and they are targeted individual sanctions on senior officials in the Afwerki regime. And this looks like, after 2 decades of practically nothing, the best chance we've ever had of hopefully getting these people, the survivors, released.
Wow,
so
20 years.
Yeah.
20 years. And they had no legal
They've never been
representation.
charged. They haven't been charged, haven't been tried.
No trial.
What we heard was no medical assistance for those prisoners.
Correct.
Well, anyway, thank you very much, Freweini. This was wonderful, and
Thank you for having me and for the opportunity. It means a lot to me and to my family to kind of continue his legacy in a way,
yeah. Well, you're a wonderful connection to Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.